My name is Alexander Sterling, and I've been living a lie for 5 years. Not the kind of small white lie you tell to spare someone's feelings, but the kind that hollows out your soul piece by piece until you're nothing but an expensive shell of a man. It started in 2018 at the annual Children's Hospital charity auction in San Francisco. I was 30 years old and already worth $200 million from my AI startup, but still suffocating under my father's shadow. Harrison Sterling, you might know the name from the Forbes lists, had dragged me to yet another networking opportunity disguised as philanthropy. The ballroom was filled with the usual suspects: tech moguls, old money families, politicians, and socialites, all competing to see who could donate the most while taking the biggest tax write-offs. I was nursing my third whiskey, counting the minutes until I could escape when she walked onto the stage. Kaya Williams. She moved like liquid poetry, her dark skin glistening under the chandeliers, as she began what the auction program called a contemporary dance performance. But this wasn't just performance, this was pure raw emotion, translated into movement. Every gesture told a story of struggle and triumph, of pain, transformed into beauty. Her natural hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and she wore a flowing dress that seemed to dance with her deep burgundy against her rich brown skin. I forgot to breathe. The entire ballroom fell silent except for the haunting piano melody that accompanied her 3-minute piece. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was transfixed watching her graceful bow, the way she smiled, genuine and unguarded, so different from the calculated expressions I was used to seeing in my world. "Beautiful, isn't she?" My father's voice cut through my trance. "Talented girl, shame about the complications." I knew exactly what he meant by complications, and the casual racism in his tone made my stomach turn. But I couldn't look away from her as she gracefully exited the stage, disappearing into the crowd of admirers. That night, I learned everything I could about Kaya Williams. 23 years old, a graduate of Juilliard, she'd been dancing professionally for 5 years and had recently opened her own studio in Oakland. She taught underprivileged kids and performed at charity events like tonight's, often donating her time for causes she believed in. She was everything I wasn't: authentic, passionate, unafraid to be herself in a world that might not accept her. 3 days later, I did something I'd never done before. I lied about who I was. I showed up at her dance studio in Oakland, driving my oldest car, a modest Honda Civic I'd bought in college, wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. I told her I was Alex, a software developer who'd seen her perform and was interested in taking private lessons. She was skeptical at first. I was clearly not dancer material, but when I offered to pay her premium rates for beginner classes, she agreed. That first lesson was a disaster. I had 2 left feet and the coordination of a newborn giraffe. But watching Kaya move, seeing her passion up close, hearing her laugh when I inevitably stumbled, it was worth every moment of embarrassment. "You're really terrible at this," she said after I'd tripped over my own feet for the 10th time. "I know," I admitted, laughing despite myself. "But you make it look so effortless. I had to try." Something in her expression softened. Most people don't understand that dance isn't just about technique. It's about truth, about showing who you really are when all the pretenses fall away. If only she knew how deeply those words cut. Over the next few weeks, I kept coming back. Not because I was getting any better at dancing, I wasn't, but because those 2 hours twice a week became the only time I felt real. Kaya had this way of seeing through bullshit, of demanding honesty, without even trying. When I was with her, I wasn't Alexander Sterling, heir to a fortune built on generational wealth and social climbing. I was just Alex, a guy who made her laugh and brought her coffee and listened to her dreams of opening a larger studio someday. But every night I went home to my penthouse in Pacific Heights, to family dinners where my father discussed which eligible socialite daughters would make suitable wives for me, to board meetings where we decided which charities would get our generous donations based on their potential for positive publicity. The contrast was killing me. "You seem different lately," my father observed one evening over dinner. We were dining alone in his mansion's formal dining room, attended by staff who moved like ghosts around us. More distracted, just focused on work. I lied smoothly. It was becoming easier to lie, which should have terrified me more than it did. Good, because I've been thinking it's time you settled down. Isabella Hartwell's parents have expressed interest in a potential match. Beautiful girl, excellent breeding, her father's pharmaceutical company would complement our portfolio nicely. Isabella. I knew her from various social functions. Blonde, perfectly polished, the kind of woman who'd been groomed since birth to marry well and produce appropriate heirs. She was perfectly lovely and utterly wrong for me in every way that mattered. I'm not ready for marriage, Dad. You're 30 years old, Alexander. You have responsibilities to this family, to our legacy. You can't spend your life playing around with your little computer programs forever. Little computer programs. My AI company was revolutionizing predictive analytics for financial markets, but to him it was just a hobby until I took my proper place in the family business. That night I called Kaya. We'd started talking on the phone sometimes, usually after her evening classes when she was winding down. Her voice was always slightly hoarse from teaching, and I loved the way she sounded tired, but content, fulfilled by work that mattered to her. How was your day, Alex? Such a simple question, but from her, it felt like coming home. Complicated, I said, which was the closest I could come to the truth. Tell me about yours. Did little Marcus finally nail that routine you've been working on with him? Marcus was 8 years old, one of the kids from the neighborhood who took classes at her studio on scholarship. She'd been trying to teach him a simple hip-hop sequence for weeks, and his breakthrough had become our shared obsession. He did. The joy in her voice was infectious. Alex, well, I wish you could have seen his face when he finally got it. Pure magic. This is why I do this work. You know, these kids don't have much, but when they're dancing, when they're expressing themselves, they're unlimited. I closed my eyes, picturing her face as she talked about her students. This was her truth, her passion, and here I was lying to her about everything that mattered. You're amazing, Kaya, I said softly. There was a pause. You know what I love about you, Alex? You see me, not what I could be to you, not what I could do for you, but who I actually am. Do you know how rare that is? My chest tightened. If only she knew that everything she loved about me was built on deception. But I was in too deep to turn back now. Every day with her made the thought of losing her more unbearable, and every day the weight of my real life pressed down harder. Tomorrow, I would have to attend another charity gala with my father's smile and make small talk with people like Isabella Hartwell, pretend to be the man I was expected to be. But tonight I was just Alex talking to the woman I was falling in love with, even though she didn't know who I really was. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to show Kaya my truth, I'd built the biggest lie of my life, and I was about to make it so much worse. 6 months into our dance lessons, I'd mastered exactly 2 basic moves and fallen completely irreversibly in love with Kaya Williams. But love built on lies is a house of cards, and I was about to add another floor. I think we should expand your social circle, I told her one Thursday evening after a particularly disastrous attempt at a pirouette. We were sitting on the floor of her studio sharing takeout Chinese food from containers that cost less than the wine my father served with casual dinners. Kaya raised an eyebrow. My social circle. What's wrong with my social circle? Nothing's wrong with it, I said quickly. I just mean, maybe we could hang out outside of dance lessons sometimes. As friends. Friends. The word tasted like ash in my mouth, but I couldn't risk moving too fast and scaring her away. She studied my face with those perceptive dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Alex, are you asking me out? My heart hammered against my ribs. Would that be okay? Her smile was like sunrise. I thought you'd never ask. Our first real date was coffee at a small cafe in Oakland, far from anywhere I might be recognized. I'd traded my usual tailored suits for jeans and sneakers, driving the Honda instead of my Tesla. Every detail had to be perfect, perfectly ordinary. So tell me something real about yourself, Kaya said, wrapping her hands around her mug. She'd ordered a simple black coffee. I'd gotten some elaborate latte that cost more than I was pretending I could afford. Beyond the fact that you're possibly the world's worst dancer. I laughed, but her request hit like a punch to the gut. Something real. God, where could I even start? I grew up feeling invisible. I said finally, which was true enough. My father had all these expectations, these plans for who I was supposed to become. I spent so long trying to meet them that I forgot who I actually was underneath. Her expression softened. And who are you underneath? I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. But when I'm with you, I feel closer to the answer. It was the most honest thing I'd said in months, even wrapped in omissions and half-truths. My father thinks dance is a waste of time, she said quietly. Says I should have gone to law school, gotten a real career. He doesn't understand that this is real to me, more real than anything else in my life. He's wrong, I said fiercely. What you do, the way you move, the way you teach those kids, it's the most real thing I've ever seen. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were calloused from years of dancing, strong and warm. Thank you for seeing that. We talked for 3 hours. About her childhood in Richmond, growing up as the daughter of a postal worker and a school librarian who'd sacrificed everything to pay for her dance training. About her dreams of expanding her studio, maybe starting a scholarship program for kids who couldn't afford lessons. About the way dance had saved her when she felt lost and alone in the world. I told her about feeling trapped by expectations, about building my software company as a way to prove I was more than just my father's son. I couldn't tell her about the 200 million in my accounts, but I could talk about the satisfaction of creating something from nothing, of solving problems that mattered. You know what I think? She said as we walked to our cars afterward. I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. It takes courage to walk away from other people's plans for your life. If only she knew I was still very much trapped in those plans. Over the next few weeks, I orchestrated a careful dance of my own engineering coincidental meetings, suggesting restaurants in neighborhoods where we'd never encounter anyone from my usual circles, timing our dates around my family obligations. It was exhausting and exhilarating and absolutely terrifying. I really like you, Alex, she told me one evening as we walked along the Oakland waterfront. The city lights reflected in the bay, and for a moment I could almost pretend we were just a normal couple falling in love. I really like you too, I said, which was the understatement of the century. But sometimes I feel like there are parts of yourself you're holding back, like you're afraid to let me see all of you. My blood turned to ice. What you mean? I don't know exactly, it's just sometimes you seem to disappear into yourself, like you're thinking about something else, somewhere else you need to be. She wasn't wrong. Even when I was with her, part of me was always calculating what lies I needed to maintain, what stories I needed to keep straight, what excuses I'd need to make to my father about where I'd been. I'm sorry, I said. I don't mean to seem distracted. You have my full attention, I promise. She stopped walking and turned to face me. Alex, whatever it is you're not telling me, I hope someday you'll trust me enough to share it. Because I'm falling for you, and I want to fall for all of you, not just the parts you think are safe to show me. The words I love you too were right there on my tongue, desperate to be spoken. But how could I say them when she didn't even know who I really was? Instead, I kissed her, right there on the waterfront with the bay breeze in our hair and the taste of honesty and deception mingling on our lips. It was perfect and terrible and the beginning of the end of everything. Back in Pacific Heights, my other life continued its relentless march forward. My father had arranged for me to escort Isabella Hartwell to several social events, just to get acquainted. She was everything he described: beautiful, well-bred, appropriately ambitious. She laughed at my jokes and knew exactly which fork to use at formal dinners, and never challenged anything I said. Being with her was like wearing a perfectly tailored straitjacket. You seem distracted tonight, Isabella observed at the opera. We were sitting in my family's box watching La Traviata while I thought about Kaya's laugh and the way she moved her hands when she talked. Sorry, just thinking about work. Daddy says you've built quite an impressive company, though I suppose you'll be transitioning to the family business soon. The casual assumption in her voice that my dreams and ambitions were just hobbies to be abandoned when it became convenient made me want to scream. Actually, I love what I do. I'm not planning to transition anywhere. A small frown creased her perfect features. Oh, well, I'm sure you and your father will work something out. Meanwhile, Kaya and I were falling deeper into each other, 3 months of coffee dates and long walks and conversations that lasted until dawn. She showed me parts of Oakland I'd never seen, introduced me to her friends, other artists and dancers and teachers who worked multiple jobs to pursue their passions. They welcomed me warmly, this supposed software developer who clearly adored their friend. The guilt was eating me alive. You know what I love about your world? I told her one night as we lay on a blanket in a small park looking up at the stars, you could barely see through the city's light pollution. My world. This world. Real people doing work that matters and creating beauty, making a difference. It's so different from, I caught myself just in time, from what I grew up thinking success looked like. She turned on her side to look at me. What did success look like to you growing up? Money, power, social status, marrying the right woman and producing the right heirs, and never ever stepping outside the lines that had been drawn for me before I was born. Empty, I said finally. It looked empty. She kissed my cheek softly. Well, you're not empty now. But I was. Every lie I told her carved out another piece of my soul until I felt like a hollow man pretending to be real. The worst part was how happy she made me. When I was with Kaya, I felt like the person I was supposed to be, funny, genuine, present. She brought out parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. With her, I could talk about books and dreams and fears without calculating how each word would be received or what advantage it might provide. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered one night after we'd made love for the first time in her small apartment above the dance studio. I know I'm falling in love with you, I whispered back and meant it with every broken piece of my heart. But even as we held each other in the dark, I could feel the weight of my real life pressing down on us. My father's expectations, Isabella's patient, waiting the shareholders who expected me to eventually take my place in the sterling empire. How long could I keep living two lives before one of them destroyed the other? I was about to find out. By month 9, I had become a master of deception. Not by choice, but by necessity, because the alternative was losing the only real thing in my hollow, gilded existence. Monday through Wednesday belonged to Alexander Sterling, board meetings in glass towers, charity galas where I smiled and wrote checks, dinners with Isabella where we discussed our future in terms of mutual portfolio benefits. Thursday through Sunday belonged to Alex, the man who brought Kaya her favorite coffee before her evening classes, who listened to her students practice their routines, who held her close in her tiny apartment, and pretended the outside world didn't exist. The problem with living two lives is that eventually they start to bleed into each other. You've been different lately, my father observed over breakfast at his estate. We were sitting in the morning room surrounded by oil paintings of dead sterling patriarchs who all seemed to be judging me. More settled, I approve. I nearly choked on my coffee. Settled. If only he knew that I spent most of my time in a state of barely controlled panic, constantly checking my phone for texts from Kaya while sitting through business meetings, mentally rehearsing lies to explain my absences. Isabella's been a positive influence, I assume. Something like that, I muttered. Good. Her father and I have been discussing a potential merger between our companies. Nothing too aggressive, just a strategic alliance that would benefit from personal connections. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I was being sold like cattle, my romantic life treated as a business asset. I haven't made any commitments to Isabella, Dad. No, but you've been seeing her regularly for months. People talk, Alexander. Expectations are being formed. You understand the position this puts the family in. Expectations. The word that had ruled my entire life. That evening I drove to Oakland in a state of barely contained fury. Kaya was teaching a class for teenagers when I arrived, and I sat in the corner watching her work. She was patient and encouraging with a 16-year-old named Maya, who was struggling with a complex sequence, breaking it down into smaller pieces until the girl's face lit up with understanding. Art isn't about perfection, Kaya told her students as they cooled down. It's about truth, about finding your voice and having the courage to let it be heard. Truth. The word felt like a knife between my ribs. After class, we walked to our usual cafe, but I couldn't shake my agitation. Rough day? Kaya asked, studying my face with those perceptive eyes that saw too much. You could say that. I tried to smile, but it felt brittle. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I'm just going through the motions of being who everyone expects me to be. So stop, she said simply. It's not that easy. Isn't it, Alex? Life is short. Too short to spend it pretending to be someone you're not. She reached across the table and took my hand. What would happen if you just stopped pretending? If you lived your truth instead of everyone else's expectations? I'd lose everything I thought. My father would disown me. The Sterling Empire would crumble. Isabella would be humiliated. The shareholders would revolt. But looking into Kaya's eyes, I realized something that terrified me. I didn't care about any of that nearly as much as I cared about her. What if my truth is complicated? I asked. Everyone's truth is complicated. That's what makes it real. That night, we made love with a desperate intensity that scared me. I held her afterward, memorizing the feel of her skin, the sound of her breathing, the way she fit perfectly against my chest. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, I whispered back, and wondered if love built on lies could ever be real. The next morning brought crisis. My assistant called at 6 a.m. There was an emergency board meeting. One of our major clients was threatening to pull their contract, and my immediate presence was required. I was supposed to take Kaya to brunch. We'd planned it weeks ago, and she was excited to try this new place in Berkeley that served authentic Southern food like her grandmother used to make. I'm so sorry, I told her over the phone, hating the disappointment in her voice. Something came up at work, emergency client situation. On a Sunday morning, software development never sleeps, I said, which was technically true but felt like swallowing glass. It's okay, she said, but I could hear the hurt she was trying to hide. These things happen. They were happening more and more frequently. The delicate balance I'd been maintaining was starting to collapse under its own weight. The board meeting lasted 6 hours. By the time I escaped, it was evening and Kaya was teaching her advanced class. I drove to the studio anyway, desperate to see her to apologize properly. She was working with 3 of her most talented students on a piece about resilience, about rising from adversity. The choreography was stunning, powerful and graceful and absolutely heartbreaking. I watched from the doorway, transfixed by the way she moved, the way she guided her students to find their own emotional truth in the movement. This was her world. Real, meaningful, beautiful, and I was contaminating it with my lies. Alex, one of her students, a college kid named Jordan, spotted me first. Come see what we've been working on. Kaya turned and her face lit up in a way that made my chest tight. I thought you were dealing with your work emergency. It wrapped up earlier than expected. I lied smoothly. Wanted to surprise you. She kissed me softly, tasting like the peppermint tea she always drank during long rehearsals. I'm glad you're here. We were just finishing up. As her students packed up their things, Kaya pulled me aside. Alex, can I ask you something? My stomach dropped. Of course. What exactly do you do for work, I mean? You've mentioned software development, but you're always so vague about the details. I'd been dreading this question for months. It's pretty boring actually. Data analysis, predictive modeling, nothing very exciting. But you work weekends a lot, and you seem, I don't know, stressed about it sometimes, like there's more pressure than there should be for a regular developer position. She was too smart, too observant. Of course she'd noticed the inconsistencies. I'm freelance, I said, building the lie in real time. Multiple clients, irregular schedules, it's the price of independence. She nodded, seeming to accept the explanation, but something in her eyes had shifted. A tiny seed of doubt planted and beginning to grow. That night she was quieter than usual. We went back to her apartment, ordered Thai food, watched a movie on her laptop while curled up on her small couch. But I could feel her watching me, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Alex. Do you ever think about the future? Our future. The question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean, where is this going? We've been together for 9 months, and sometimes I feel like I don't really know you, like you're holding parts of yourself back. I turned to face her fully. Kaya, I love you. Isn't that enough? Love is enough, yes, but love requires trust, and trust requires honesty. She was quiet for a moment. I've been hurt before, Alex, by someone who wasn't who he claimed to be. I can't go through that again. My blood turned to ice. What happened? My ex-fiancé, we were together for 2 years before I found out he was married. Had been the whole time we were dating. He fed me lie after lie about business trips and family obligations and work emergencies. Her voice was steady, but I could see the old pain in her eyes. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that everything I thought we had was built on deception, that the man I loved didn't actually exist. I felt like I was drowning. Kaya, promise me something, she said, taking my hands in hers. Promise me that whatever else happens between us, you'll always be honest with me. That what we have is real. I looked into her eyes, those beautiful, trusting eyes, and I lied to the woman I loved more than life itself. I promise, I said. What we have is real. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was sealing both our fates. Because in 3 days, my father was going to announce my engagement to Isabella Hartwell at the Sterling Foundation's annual gala. And I still hadn't found the courage to tell either woman the truth. The Sterling Foundation gala was 3 days away, and I was coming apart at the seams. My father had made it clear the engagement announcement was happening whether I was ready or not. Isabella had been fitted for a stunning ring, 3 carats flawless, the kind of diamond that screamed appropriate match to our social circle. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. You look terrible, Kaya observed when I showed up at her studio Wednesday evening. She was working alone, choreographing a new piece to a haunting piano melody that seemed to echo my internal chaos. Thanks, just what every man wants to hear from his girlfriend. She stopped dancing and really looked at me. Alex, what's wrong? And don't say work. This is bigger than work. I opened my mouth to deflect to lie to maintain the careful house of cards I'd built around our relationship. But looking at her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing old dance clothes, sweat glistening on her skin, from hours of practice, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. Can we go somewhere private? I need to talk to you about something. Her expression grew serious. Of course, let me just grab my things. We drove to the same waterfront where I'd first kissed her, where everything had started to feel real and impossible at the same time. The bay was choppy that night, whitecaps visible in the moonlight, and the wind carried the salt smell of uncertainty. Kaya, I began, then stopped. How do you tell someone you love that your entire relationship is built on lies? How do you explain that the man they've fallen for doesn't actually exist? You're scaring me, she said softly. I don't want to scare you. God, that's the last thing I want. But there are things about me, about my life, that I haven't told you. Important things. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the dim light. Okay, tell me. My name isn't Alex. I mean, it is, but it's Alexander. Alexander Sterling. I watched her process this so the moment recognition flickered in her eyes. Everyone in the Bay Area knew the Sterling name. Sterling, as in Sterling Technologies, Sterling Foundation. Yes. Your father is Harrison Sterling, the Harrison Sterling. Yes. She was quiet for so long I started to panic. Then she laughed a short, bitter sound that cut through me like glass. Of course he is, of course. She turned away from me, looking out at the water. So when you told me you were a freelance software developer, I lied. I own a company, a big company, worth... I swallowed hard. Worth a lot of money. How much money, Alex Alexander? Whatever your name is. Around 200 million. Another silence. Longer this time. $200 million. Her voice was flat, emotionless. And you thought I wouldn't be able to handle dating someone with money. It's not about the money, I said desperately. It's about everything that comes with it. The expectations, the social obligations, the way people see you differently when they know. I wanted you to see me, just me, not my bank account or my family name. She finally turned back to face me, and the hurt in her eyes was devastating. But I wasn't seeing you as I was seeing a lie, a character you created. Her voice broke slightly. God, Alex, do you have any idea what this feels like? I told you about my ex, about what it did to me, when I found out he wasn't who I thought he was. And you sat there and promised me honesty. I know, and I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you so many times, but what? But you thought I was some gold digger who'd only be interested in your money, but you thought I was too stupid to handle the truth. What? But I was terrified of losing you. I said the words tearing out of my chest. You're the only real thing in my life, Kaya. The only person who sees something in me worth loving. Without the money, without the name, without all the bullshit that comes with being a sterling, you still chose me. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how desperately I needed that to be real? Tears were streaming down her face now. It could have been real, you idiot. If you just trusted me enough to tell me the truth from the beginning, it could have been real. It still can be. Kaya, I love you. That part was never a lie. Wasn't it? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Because the man I fell in love with was honest and genuine and brave enough to live his own truth. But that man doesn't exist, does he? You're just another rich boy playing dress up, slumming it with a poor black girl for a few months before you go back to your real life. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? Because here's what I think happened. You saw me at some charity event where I was probably performing for your entertainment, decided I'd be a fun distraction from your boring socialite girlfriend, and created an entire fake persona to get me into bed. No, Kaya, that's not... Then tell me about her. My blood froze. What? Your socialite girlfriend, the one you're supposed to marry, because there is one, isn't there? There has to be. Men like you don't stay single in that world. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Oh my God. Her voice was barely a whisper. There is someone. You're with someone else. Kaya, let me explain. Are you engaged? Technically, are you engaged? The word exploded out of me like a physical wound. Yes. She staggered backward as if I'd slapped her. You're engaged. You're engaged to someone else and you've been sleeping with me for 9 months. It's not real, I said desperately. It's an arrangement, a business merger. I don't love her. I love you. An arrangement. She laughed, and the sound was broken, terrible. Of course it is. And what am I, Alex? What was I in all this? You're everything, I said, reaching for her, but she pulled away. I'm your whore, she said flatly. Your dirty little secret. The black girl you fuck on the side while you plan your white wedding. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. You're not. Then what am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm the other woman in my own relationship. The one who doesn't even know she's the other woman. I felt like I was dying. You're the woman I love, the woman I choose, the only woman I've ever really chosen. But you didn't choose me, did you? Not really. Because choosing me would mean giving up your engagement, your father's approval, your perfect sterling life. And you can't do that, can you? The silence stretched between us, full of everything I couldn't say. I'm trying to figure out how to do both, I finally admitted. Both. She shook her head slowly. You want to keep your society bride and your black mistress. Have your cake and eat it too. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Alex? Because I need you to explain to me how this ends with anything other than me getting my heart shattered when you eventually choose the life you were born to live. I opened my mouth to answer, to tell her I'd find a way that I'd figure out how to break free from my father's expectations, how to build a life with her that didn't require destroying everything else. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, we both knew the truth. I was a coward, and cowards don't get the girl. I need time, I said finally, to figure out how to untangle myself from all this, to find a way to choose you properly. Time, she repeated. How much time? I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the water. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but final. I can't do this, Alex. I can't be your secret while you figure out whether I'm worth disrupting your life for. I've been down this road before and I won't do it again. Kaya, please. No. She turned to face me one last time. I'm worth more than that. I'm worth being someone's first choice, not their backup plan. I'm worth honesty from the beginning, not lies wrapped up in pretty excuses. She started walking toward her car and I felt my world crumbling. What does this mean? I called after her. She paused without turning around. It means you need to decide who you really are, Alexander Sterling. And when you figure it out, if the answer is someone who can love me honestly and completely, you know where to find me. Then she was gone. Taillights disappearing into the night, leaving me alone with the sound of waves and the weight of my choices. The engagement announcement was in 2 days, and I just lost the only thing that had ever mattered to me. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, replaying every word of my conversation with Kaya, feeling her slip away from me like sand through my fingers. By morning, I was exhausted, heartbroken, and no closer to a solution. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I couldn't go through with the engagement announcement. I found my father in his study at 8 a.m. already dressed in one of his perfectly tailored suits, reading the Wall Street Journal with his morning coffee. The room smelled like leather and old money and the weight of generations of sterling expectations. "Alexander, you look terrible. I hope you're not coming down with something right before the gala." "Dad, we need to talk." He folded his newspaper with precise movements and gave me his full attention. This should have been gratifying. Harrison Sterling's undivided focus was something CEOs paid millions for, but it only made my stomach churn. "About the engagement announcement, yes, I can't do it." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I beg your pardon?" "I can't marry Isabella. I don't love her. I love someone else." My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Love, Alexander. You're 35 years old. Surely you understand by now that love is a luxury we can afford after we've met our obligations." "What if I don't want to meet those obligations?" "Then you're not the man I raised you to be." He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked his perfectly manicured gardens. "Tell me about her." "What?" "This woman you think you love. Tell me about her." I should have known he'd find out eventually. Harrison Sterling didn't maintain his empire by being uninformed about anything that mattered. "Her name is Kaya Williams. She's a dancer and choreographer. She owns a studio in Oakland." His voice was flat, unsurprised. "The one from the charity gala last year. I wondered when that little infatuation would resurface." My blood ran cold. "You knew I. Alexander, I've known about your extracurricular activities for months. Did you really think you could conduct an affair under my nose without me finding out? I have people whose entire job is knowing things." The casual way he said it, affair like I was cheating on a wife instead of trying to escape an arranged marriage, made me sick. "It's not an affair. I love her." "You think you love her? There's a difference." He turned back to face me and his expression was granite. "Let me tell you what I know about Kaya Williams. She's 28 years old, graduated from Juilliard with substantial debt, which she's still paying off. Her dance studio is mortgaged to the hilt, and she's 3 months behind on rent. Her father works for the postal service. Her mother is a part-time librarian, hardly the background of someone equipped to be a sterling wife. You had her investigated." "Of course I did. Just as I've had Isabella investigated, just as I investigate anyone who comes into our orbit. It's called due diligence." I felt like I was going to throw up. "You bastard." "I'm a realist. And the reality is, this Kaya Williams is a distraction. A very beautiful, very talented distraction, but a distraction nonetheless. You've had your fun sown, your wild oats gotten this rebellion out of your system. Now it's time to be a man and do your duty. My duty to marry someone I don't love for the sake of a business merger. Your duty to preserve what 6 generations of Sterlings have built. Your duty to your family, your legacy, your responsibilities as my heir." I laughed, and the sound was bitter, even to my own ears. "What if I don't want to be your heir?" The silence that followed was deafening. "Excuse me. What if I renounce it all? The company, the foundation, the money? What if I walk away and build a life with the woman I actually love?" My father's face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally, cold fury. "Then you'll do it with nothing. Not 1 penny of Sterling money, not 1 connection from the Sterling name, not 1 safety net that your family has provided. You'll be cut off completely, permanently, and irrevocably." "Fine. Fine." His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his perfect composure I'd seen in years. "Alexander, you have no idea what you're saying. Do you think your little software company exists in a vacuum? Half your clients are Sterling family connections. Your office building, Sterling Properties, owns it. Your investors, Sterling associates, everyone. Without the family backing, your company will collapse within 6 months." I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, but I pressed on. "Then I'll start over. People do it every day. People like Kaya Williams do it every day. People like you, soft privileged with no real understanding of what actual struggle looks like. They don't survive that transition. You'd be bankrupt and broken within a year. He moved closer, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet and deadly. But here's what really disturbs me, Alexander. You're willing to destroy not just your own life, but hers as well. Because make no mistake, if you pursue this fantasy, you'll drag her down with you. Do you think she'll still love you when you can't pay her studio's rent? When you're living in some squalid apartment, working at a job that pays a fraction of what you're used to? When the stress and resentment start eating away at whatever pretty emotions you think you're feeling now? You don't know her. She's not like that. She's human, and humans have a remarkable capacity for falling out of love when the romance gets replaced by financial stress and social humiliation. He returned to his desk, sat down, and pulled out a file folder. But let's say I'm wrong. Let's say she's a saint who'll love you even when you're poor and bitter and broken. What kind of life are you offering her then? What kind of future? He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the desk. It was Kaya leaving her studio late at night, looking exhausted. She works 16-hour days trying to keep that business afloat. Did you know she teaches classes at 3 other studios just to make ends meet? Did you know she hasn't taken a real vacation in 4 years because she can't afford to close the studio for even a week? Each fact hit like a physical blow. I'd known she worked hard, but I hadn't realized. Now imagine that life but worse, because when you're with her, you won't just be broke, you'll be infamous. The sterling heir who threw away his birthright for love. The society papers will have a field day. Your relationship will be a public spectacle, and every hardship you face will be fodder for gossip columnists. Stop. I'm just getting started. Because here's the final piece: you haven't considered me. Do you think I'll just quietly let you walk away with sterling trade secrets in your head? Do you think I won't use every legal and financial tool at my disposal to make sure you can't compete with the family business? I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the ruthless man who'd built an empire on the backs of anyone who got in his way. You destroy me. I'd protect what's mine, just as any father would. The room was spinning. Everything he'd said was true, I realized. Without the sterling name and connections, my company would crumble. Without my company, I'd have no way to support myself, let alone Kaya, and with my father actively working against me. There is another option, he said, his voice returning to its normal, controlled tone. What? Marry Isabella, take your place in the family business, and keep Kaya Williams as a mistress. I felt like he'd punched me in the gut. What? It's a perfectly common arrangement in our circles. Isabella's sophisticated enough to understand the realities of marriage at our level. As long as you're discreet and don't embarrass the family publicly, she won't care what you do in your private time. That's disgusting. That's pragmatic. You get to keep both women, preserve the family legacy, and maintain your lifestyle. Everyone wins. Except for Kaya, who deserves better than being someone's dirty secret. Kaya Williams gets financial security, protection, and the love of a wealthy, powerful man. Trust me, she'll adapt to the arrangement faster than you think. I stood up so quickly I knocked over my chair. You're insane if you think I'd do that to her. Then you're choosing poverty, obscurity, and the eventual destruction of both your lives. Because those are your only options, Alexander. Marry Isabella and keep Kaya on the side, or lose everything and destroy the woman you claim to love in the process. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who would crush anyone, including his own son, to maintain his precious empire. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow night. The engagement announcement happens at the gala as planned, or you can consider yourself disinherited as of Saturday morning. I walked toward the door on unsteady legs. Alexander, I turned back. Choose wisely. Some mistakes can't be undone. I left his study feeling like a man walking to his own execution, because I finally understood the impossible choice I was facing. Destroy my life and Kaya's by walking away from everything, or destroy my soul by accepting the cage my father had built for me. Either way, I was going to lose the only thing that had ever mattered, and I had less than 36 hours to decide. The Sterling Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. 500 of San Francisco's most influential people gathered in the grand ballroom of the St. Francis Hotel, dressed in designer G. The Sterling Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. 500 of San Francisco's most influential people gathered in the grand ballroom of the St. Francis Hotel, dressed in designer gowns and $1,000 tuxedos, sipping champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the spectacle with new eyes. These were my people, tech moguls, old money families, politicians, and socialites who'd been born into privilege and spent their lives protecting it. 6 months ago, I would have seen sophistication and success. Now I saw hollow people playing hollow games, just like I was about to do. "You look handsome tonight," Isabella said, appearing at my side in a stunning midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Kaya's annual rent. She was radiant, perfectly put together, everything a sterling bride should be. "Thank you," I managed. "You look beautiful." She smiled and linked her arms through mine. "Are you nervous about tonight?" "Terrified," I said, which was the first honest thing I'd said to her in months. "Don't be. We're going to be wonderful together, Alexander. Our families, our backgrounds, our goals, everything aligns perfectly. It's like we were designed for each other." Designed, like we were products in a business plan instead of people falling in love. "Isabella, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you love me?" She looked genuinely surprised by the question. What a strange thing to ask. Of course I care for you deeply. We're compatible in every way that matters. That's not what I asked. She was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Alexander, love is a luxury for people who can afford to make mistakes. We can't afford mistakes. We have responsibilities, legacies, to protect, expectations to meet. What we have is better than love. It's partnership. Partnership. Not love, not passion, not the desperate consuming need I felt for Kaya every moment of every day. What if I told you I was in love with someone else?" Her grip on my arm tightened slightly. "Then I'd say you need to decide whether your feelings are more important than your obligations. Because this engagement is happening tonight, whether you're ready or not. Too many people have too much invested in it to change course now." She wasn't wrong. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley power brokers. Business deals worth hundreds of millions would be sealed tonight on the assumption that Sterling Technologies and Hartwell Pharmaceuticals were merging through marriage. Political alliances, charitable foundations, social hierarchies, all of it balanced on the knife's edge of this announcement, and I was about to destroy it all. Or was I? "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." My father's voice boomed across the ballroom through the sound system. The crowd quieted immediately when Harrison Sterling spoke. People listened. "Thank you all for joining us tonight for the Sterling Foundation's annual gala. As you know, this foundation has been supporting education and arts programs throughout the Bay Area for over 30 years. Polite applause. I felt like I was watching from outside my own body. But tonight isn't just about celebrating our charitable work. Tonight is about celebrating the future, the continuation of legacies, and the formation of new partnerships that will benefit our entire community." My mouth went dry. This was it, the moment of truth. "It is my great pleasure to announce the engagement of my son, Alexander Sterling, to Miss Isabella Hartwell, daughter of Charles and Margaret Hartwell." The applause was thunderous. Champagne glasses rose in toasts. Camera flashes went off as photographers captured the moment for society pages. Isabella turned to me radiant with triumph, and I kissed her. Because what else could I do? 500 people were watching. My father was beaming with pride, and the woman I actually loved was 30 miles away in Oakland, probably teaching her evening class, unaware that I was sealing both our fates with this public betrayal. "Congratulations, son," my father whispered as he embraced me moments later. "You made the right choice." Had I? As the evening wore on, as countless people offered their congratulations and best wishes, as Isabella showed off her engagement ring and planned our future with excited friends, I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece. "Spring wedding, I think," Isabella was telling a group of socialite wives. "Something elegant, but not too elaborate. Perhaps at the family estate in Napa. Oh, how romantic," one of them gushed. Alexander, you're so lucky to have found such a perfect match. Perfect match. I smiled and nodded and played my part while my soul crumbled. Around midnight, I escaped to the hotel's terrace, desperate for air that didn't taste like champagne and lies. The city sparkled below me, and somewhere out there, Kaya was living her authentic life while I suffocated in mine. Having second thoughts, I turned to find my father joining me on the terrace, 2 glasses of cognac in his hands. Just needed some air. He handed me a glass. It's natural to feel overwhelmed. You've just committed to a lifetime partnership. That's no small thing. Is that what you felt when you married Mom? Overwhelmed? His expression softened slightly the first time I'd mentioned my mother in months. She'd died when I was 15, and we rarely talked about her anymore. Your mother was a remarkable woman, beautiful, intelligent, perfectly bred for the life she married into. She understood her role and played it flawlessly. Did you love her? I respected her immensely. We were partners in every sense that mattered. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city lights. Love is dangerous, Alexander. It makes you vulnerable clouds. Your judgment leads you to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Your mother and I had something better than love. We had mutual respect, shared goals, and compatible lifestyles. And you were happy. Happiness is a luxury. We were successful. I thought about Kaya's laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her students, the way she made me feel like I could be anyone, be better than I was. What if I can't do it, Dad? What if I can't be the man you want me to be? Then you'll be nothing, he said simply. And nothing is exactly what you'll have. When I finally got home to my penthouse at 3 a.m., I stood in my marble bathroom looking at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a $5,000 tuxedo, engaged to a beautiful woman from a perfect family, heir to a fortune most people couldn't imagine. And I had never felt more empty in my life. I pulled out my phone and stared at Kaya's number. She deserved to know what I'd done, deserved to hear it from me rather than read about it in the society pages tomorrow. But I couldn't bring myself to make the call. Instead, I poured myself another drink and tried to convince myself that my father was right, that I'd made the practical choice, the smart choice, the only choice that made sense. But as I sat alone in my expensive apartment, surrounded by beautiful things that meant nothing, I knew the truth. I hadn't made a choice at all. I'd simply taken the path of least resistance, the road paved with other people's expectations and my own cowardice. And somewhere across the bay, the woman I loved was probably going to sleep, unaware that the man she'd given her heart to had just publicly committed to someone else. The engagement announcement would be in all the papers by morning. By noon, it would be trending on social media. By evening, everyone in the Bay Area would know that Alexander Sterling was off the market, including Kaya. I told myself I'd find a way to explain, to make her understand that this was temporary, that I was working on a solution. I told myself that love would find a way, that real feelings couldn't be killed by social obligations. I told myself a lot of lies that night. But the biggest lie was the one I told myself as I finally drifted off to sleep in my king-sized bed, that I'd had no choice. Because the truth was, I'd had a choice. And I'd chosen the cage. The society pages were brutal. Sterling Hartwell engagement, a perfect match, screamed the headline in the Chronicle's lifestyle section, accompanied by a photo of Isabella and me kissing at the moment of the announcement. We looked like the perfect power couple, beautiful, wealthy, destined for greatness. I looked like a man who'd sold his soul. For 3 days after the gala, I couldn't bring myself to contact Kaya. What could I say? How do you explain that you'd publicly committed to one woman while being in love with another? How do you ask someone to wait while you figure out how to untangle yourself from an engagement that the entire city was celebrating? On Wednesday morning, my cowardice finally caught up with me. My phone rang while I was sitting in a board meeting, pretending to pay attention to quarterly projections, while my world crumbled around me. I need to take this, I told the room when I saw her name on the screen. I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Kaya, congratulations. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I saw the announcement in the paper. You and Isabella look very happy together. Kaya let me explain. Explain what exactly? That you got engaged to your socialite girlfriend 3 days after telling me you loved me. That everything you said about choosing me was bullshit. It's not what it looks like. The engagement, it's complicated. It's not real. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Not real, Alexander, and I guess that's what I should call you now. You announced your engagement to 500 people. It was in every newspaper in the city. Your fiancé is already planning the wedding. Exactly which part of that isn't real? I don't love her, I said desperately. I love you. That's the only real thing in any of this. Do you? Because if you loved me, actually loved me, you wouldn't have been able to go through with that announcement. You wouldn't have been able to kiss her in front of all those people while knowing what it would do to me. I was trapped. My father, the business obligations, the social expectations. You were trapped by your own cowardice, she said, and the words hit like physical blows. You had a choice, Alexander. You could have chosen love over convenience, authenticity over approval, but you didn't. You chose the easy path. There was nothing easy about it. Do you think it was easy to stand up there and lie to everyone, including myself? Then why did you do it? The question hung in the air between us, demanding an answer I didn't have, or didn't want to give. Because I'm weak, I finally admitted. Because I'm a coward who spent his entire life doing what other people expected instead of what felt right. At least you're honest about that much. Kaya, please, give me time to figure this out. I can find a way to break the engagement to no. Her voice was firm, final. I told you before I won't be your secret while you figure out whether I'm worth disrupting your life for. And I certainly won't be your mistress while you plan your wedding to someone else. That's not what I'm asking. Isn't it because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what you're asking? You want me to wait in the shadows while you play happy couple with Isabella, hoping that maybe someday you'll find the courage to choose me. She was right, and we both knew it. I'm done, Alexander. We're done. Don't call me again. The line went dead, and I stood in that corporate hallway surrounded by glass and steel and the trappings of success, feeling like my life had just ended. But of course it didn't end. Life has a cruel way of continuing even when you want it to stop. The Sterling Hartwell engagement became the talk of San Francisco society. Wedding planners called constantly. Isabella threw herself into arrangements with the enthusiasm of someone planning the social event of the decade. And I went through the motions like a zombie. You seem distracted lately, Isabella observed one evening as we reviewed seating charts for the engagement party. We were in her parents' mansion in Pacific Heights, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples, and all the detritus of proper matrimonial planning. Just thinking about work. Alexander, you need to start thinking about us, about our future together. This wedding isn't planning itself. She was right, of course. The wedding had taken on a life of its own, a massive production involving two of San Francisco's most prominent families. The guest list had grown to over 800 people. The venue was booked, the flowers ordered, the band selected. What kind of honeymoon were you thinking? She asked, flipping through a travel magazine. I was considering Europe. Perhaps a month touring Italy and France. A month. The length of time I'd told Kaya I needed to figure things out. That sounds nice, I said automatically. Or we could do something more adventurous. Safari in Africa, yacht in the Mediterranean. All I could think about was Kaya's small apartment above her dance studio, the way she looked in the morning light streaming through her windows, the way she made coffee in her tiny kitchen while wearing one of my old t-shirts. Alexander, are you listening to me? Sorry, yes, Europe sounds perfect. Isabella set down her magazine and really looked at me. You know, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were having second thoughts about this whole thing. My blood froze. What makes you say that? You've been distant ever since the engagement, like your mind is somewhere else. She moved closer, placing her hand on my arm. I hope you know you can talk to me about anything. We're partners now. Partners. Not lovers, not soulmates. Partners. I'm fine, I lied. Just adjusting to everything changing so quickly. She smiled and kissed my cheek. I know it's overwhelming, but we're going to have a wonderful life together, Alexander. I promise. The thing was, I believed her. Isabella would be a perfect wife for Alexander Sterling. She understood the social obligations, the business requirements, the delicate dance of high society marriage. She would host beautiful dinner parties and raise accomplished children and never ask me to be more than the sum of my achievements. She would never challenge me to be authentic, to live my truth, to risk everything for love. She would never break my heart because she would never truly touch it. But as weeks turned into months, the weight of my deception grew heavier. I threw myself into work expanding my company, taking on bigger clients, making more money I didn't need. I attended social functions with Isabella, smiled for cameras, played the role of devoted fiancé. And every night I went home alone to my penthouse and wondered what Kaya was doing. I resisted the urge to drive by her studio for 2 months. When I finally broke down and went to Oakland, I sat in my car across the street, watching her teach an evening class through the large windows. She looked the same, beautiful, passionate, completely absorbed in her work. But there was something different about her energy, something harder, more guarded. She changed because of what I'd done to her. As I watched a man I didn't recognize join the class, he was tall, athletic, with the fluid movements of a trained dancer. I watched him move with natural grace, watched Kaya correct his positioning with professional touches that made my chest tight with jealousy. When class ended, I saw them talking. She was smiling, not the guarded smile she'd given me after learning the truth, but her real smile, the one that lit up her entire face. He made her laugh. I drove home that night knowing I'd lost her completely. Not just because of my lies and cowardice, but because she was moving on. She was rebuilding her life without me finding new connections, new possibilities. She was doing what I should have done, choosing authenticity over obligation. Instead, I was planning a wedding to a woman I didn't love while pining for the one I'd lost through my own weakness. The engagement party is next week, Isabella reminded me as we left another wedding planning session. Are you excited? Thrilled, I said, and wondered if she could hear how hollow the word sounded. Good, because everyone who matters will be there. It's going to be perfect. Perfect, the word that defined my entire trapped existence. But as we drove through the city in her father's chauffeured car, I caught a glimpse of a billboard advertising a local dance company's upcoming performance. The featured dancer was a beautiful black woman, caught mid-leap, her body telling a story of freedom and joy. It wasn't Kaya, but for a moment my heart stopped, because I realized something that night that should have been obvious months ago. Perfect wasn't what I wanted. Perfect was killing me, but by then it was too late to do anything about it. The wedding machine was in motion. My father's expectations were set in stone, and the woman I loved was learning to live without me. I was trapped in the cage I'd helped build, and the key was somewhere I no longer had the courage to reach. 2 years. 24 months of living a double life of elaborate scheduling and careful lies of being Alexander Sterling by day and Alex the software developer by night. It should have gotten easier with practice, but instead it was slowly destroying me from the inside out. The worst part wasn't the constant deception, it was how good I'd become at it. You seem happier lately, Isabella observed one evening as we attended yet another charity function. This one was for children's literacy, held in the ballroom of the Four Seasons. She looked stunning in emerald green silk, every inch the society wife she was born to be. I adjusted my tie, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, always calculating, always careful about who might see us together, more relaxed, like you've finally settled into this. She squeezed my arm affectionately. I think engagement suits you. Engagement. The word still tasted like poison in my mouth even after all this time. What Isabella didn't know was that my apparent contentment had nothing to do with our relationship. It was because I'd spent the previous evening in Kaya's bed, making love to her while rain drummed against the windows of her small apartment, feeling more alive in those few hours than I did in entire weeks of my real life. Ladies and gentlemen, the event organizer announced, we have a special treat for you tonight, a performance by some of the Bay Area's most talented dancers donating their time to support childhood literacy. I was only half listening until I saw her walk onto the stage. Kaya. My blood turned to ice. She was here at a Sterling Foundation event, performing not 30 feet from where I stood with my fiancé. She wore a flowing white dress that moved like water as she took her position, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun that showcased the graceful line of her neck. She hadn't told me she was performing tonight. Why hadn't she told me? Oh, how lovely, Isabella murmured. I remember her from last year's auction. Such a beautiful dancer. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only watch as the music began and Kaya transformed into something ethereal, her body telling a story of longing and loss that seemed to reach directly into my chest and squeeze my heart. She never looked at me during the performance, not once, but I felt like every movement was meant for me, every gesture a reminder of the connection we shared in secret, the love we expressed in shadows. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She curtsied gracefully, smiled at the crowd, and began to exit the stage. Our eyes met for just a moment. The look she gave me was complicated love and pain and something else I couldn't quite identify. Disappointment, pity. Then she was gone, disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing next to my fiancé, feeling like I'd just been turned inside out. "Excuse me," I told Isabella. "I need some air." I made it to the men's restroom just in time to splash cold water on my face and try to get my breathing under control. What was she doing here? How had she ended up performing at a Sterling Foundation event? My phone buzzed. A text from Kaya. "We need to talk. Meet me in the hotel bar in 10 minutes. I stared at the message, my hands shaking slightly. She'd never asked to meet in public before, never risked being seen together where someone might recognize me. "Are you alright?" Isabella was at my elbow when I returned to the ballroom. "You look pale." "Fine, just a headache. I think I might head home early." "Oh no, should I come with you?" No, stay and enjoy the rest of the evening. I'll just take some aspirin and get some sleep." She kissed my cheek with wifely concern. "Feel better, darling. Don't forget we have brunch with my parents tomorrow." Brunch, right. Another performance in the endless theater of our engagement. I found Kaya at a small table in the corner of the hotel bar, still wearing her white performance dress, but with her hair down, now cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. She looked beautiful and serious and slightly dangerous. "What are you doing here?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "I was hired to perform, same as always." She studied my face with those perceptive eyes. "The question is, what are you doing here? And don't say business networking." "It's a Sterling Foundation event. I'm always at Sterling Foundation events." "Right, because you're Alexander Sterling." She said my real name like it was a foreign word. "Tell me something, Alex. When were you planning to mention that your family literally owns the foundation I've been performing for? That your father's been writing the checks that pay my performance fees?" My stomach dropped. "Kaya, how long have you known that I perform at Sterling events, that I've been taking Sterling money, that I've been dancing for your entertainment? It's not like that." "Then what is it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been playing some twisted game with me." Poor little black dancer girl, so grateful for the charity work, never knowing she's been sleeping with the prince who throws her scraps. "Stop. Just stop. It's not about the money and you know it." She leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "Do I? Because I'm starting to wonder what I actually know about you, Alex. If that's even your real name. You know me better than anyone. Do I? Because the man I think I know is honest and genuine and would never let me perform at his family's events without telling me. He wouldn't let me take money from his father's foundation without mentioning the connection." She was right, and we both knew it. Every time she'd performed at a Sterling event, every check she'd received, it had been another layer of deception between us. "I should have told you," I admitted. "Yes, you should have, along with a lot of other things." She pulled something from her purse, a printed email. "I got this today, a request for me to perform at an engagement party next month. Guess whose engagement party it is?" The blood drained from my face. "Kaya." "Alexander Sterling and Isabella Hartwell. Congratulations, by the way. When were you planning to mention that you're getting married?" The words hit like physical blows. "How did you—" "Google, Alex. It's amazing what you can find when you actually look." Her voice was shaking now with anger or hurt or both. "Society pages, business journals, engagement announcements. You're quite the catch, apparently. Tech millionaire, heir to the Sterling fortune, engaged to pharmaceutical heiress Isabella Hartwell. It's like a fairy tale." "It's not real," I said desperately. "The engagement, it's complicated. It's business family pressure." "Business." She laughed and the sound was broken. "Your engagement is business. My father arranged it. I don't love her, I love you." "Then why haven't you broken it off if you love me, if this is real between us? Why are you still engaged to someone else?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no good response. How could I explain about my father's ultimatum, about the financial threats, about my own cowardice without sounding like exactly what I was, a weak man who chose comfort over courage? It's complicated, I said lamely. Complicated. She shook her head slowly. You know what's not complicated, Alex love? When you love someone, when you really love them, you choose them. You don't make them your secret while you plan your future with someone else. I am choosing you. I'm here with you, aren't I? You're here with me in secret in the shadows, while your real life happens in the light with someone else. Do you understand how that makes me feel? Like I'm something shameful, something to be hidden. You're not, then prove it. Her eyes were blazing now. Break off your engagement. Tell your father you're choosing love over money. Choose me publicly, openly, the way you chose her. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything I couldn't say. You can't do it, can you? Her voice was quiet, now resigned. You can't choose me because that would mean giving up everything else. Your family approval, your social status, your perfect sterling life. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You're just too scared to admit it. She stood up, gathering her purse. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I can't be your dirty little secret while you live your public life with someone else. Kaya, wait, please. She paused, looking down at me with eyes full of pain and something that looked like pity. I loved you, she said softly. I loved the man I thought you were, but that man doesn't exist, does he? He's just another lie you told to get what you wanted. That's not true, isn't it? Because if the man I fell in love with really existed, he wouldn't be able to do this to me. He wouldn't be able to sit here and ask me to accept being second choice to a woman he doesn't even love. She was right. The man she'd fallen in love with, honest, authentic, brave enough to live his truth, was a fiction I'd created. The real me was sitting in this hotel bar, engaged to one woman, while begging another to stay in the shadows. I need time, I said desperately, to figure out how to untangle myself from all this, to find a way to choose you properly. How much time? I don't know, months maybe. The engagement party is next month, and after that what? The wedding, the honeymoon, our 2-year anniversary. She shook her head. No, Alex, I won't wait for you to maybe find the courage to choose me someday. I deserve better than that. She started to walk away, then turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part is? I would have loved you poor. I would have loved you if you were nobody. But you'll never know that because you were too afraid to trust me with the truth. Then she was gone, walking out of the bar and out of my life, leaving me alone with my lies and my cowardice and the engagement ring burning like a brand on my finger. I sat there for a long time, nursing a whiskey and watching the ice melt, thinking about the choice she'd given me. Break off the engagement, choose love over obligation, risk everything for the woman who'd shown me what authentic life could look like. It should have been easy. But as I finally made my way back to my penthouse, back to my expensive empty life, I knew I was going to take the coward's way out. Again. 3 months after Kaya walked out of that hotel bar, I was dying by degrees. Not dramatically, there were no hospital stays or grand romantic gestures. Just a slow, steady erosion of everything that had made me feel human. The engagement party had been a magnificent success, according to Isabella and both sets of parents. 250 of San Francisco's elite gathered at the Sterling estate to celebrate our upcoming union. I smiled and shook hands and accepted congratulations while feeling like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Kaya hadn't performed at the party. The booking had been quietly cancelled, replaced by a string quartet that played tasteful classical pieces that made no one's heart race or break. I told myself it was better this way, cleaner, less complicated. I told myself a lot of lies in those days. You seem distracted again, Isabella observed one evening as we reviewed final wedding plans. The ceremony was set for June, just 4 months away. Is everything all right with the business? Fine, I said automatically, just thinking about the European expansion. She nodded, absently absorbed in choosing between 2 nearly identical shades of ivory for the table linens. Every detail had to be perfect, she insisted. This wedding would be featured in town and country, photographed for posterity, remembered as the social event of the season. The thought made me want to run screaming. I was thinking we should finalize the honeymoon plans, she continued. Daddy's offered us the villa in Tuscany for 3 weeks. Doesn't that sound divine? 3 weeks in Italy with Isabella playing newlyweds while my soul slowly died. Divine, I echoed. That night I did something I'd sworn I wouldn't do. I drove to Oakland. Her studio was dark. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, but I sat in my car across the street anyway, staring at the windows where I'd once learned to dance, where I'd once felt like I could be anyone other than Alexander Sterling. I was about to leave when I saw a light come on in the apartment above the studio. Her apartment. I watched her shadow move across the windows, probably getting ready for bed after a long day of teaching. For a moment I considered getting out of the car, walking up those familiar stairs, knocking on her door. Maybe she'd let me in. Maybe we could talk. Maybe another shadow joined hers in the window. Taller, broader, definitely male. I watched them embrace, watched him kiss her, watched her laugh at something he said. The intimacy of the moment was like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a casual visit or a friendly conversation. This was someone who belonged there, someone who had the right to hold her in her own space, someone who wasn't me. I drove home in a haze of jealousy and self-recrimination. Of course she'd moved on. What had I expected, that she'd wait forever for me to find the courage I'd never had? But knowing it intellectually and seeing it were two different things. The next morning I did something that would have horrified my former self. I hired a private investigator. Just basic information. I told him, hating myself, even as I spoke the words. I want to know who she's seeing. His name was Tobias Reed. 29 years old, originally from Atlanta, trained at Alvin Ailey and the Martha Graham Dance Company. He'd moved to the Bay Area 6 months ago to join a contemporary dance company based in San Francisco. He was also, according to the PI's report, a freelance choreographer who'd been hired to work with Kaya on a new piece her studio was developing. He was everything I wasn't: authentic, passionate, unafraid to live his art. In the photos the investigator provided, he looked comfortable in his own skin in a way I'd never managed. When he danced, when he moved, when he smiled, it was all genuine. He was who I'd pretended to be when I'd first walked into Kaya's studio 2 years ago. Are you sure you want to see this? The investigator asked when he delivered the final batch of photos. I wasn't sure, but I looked anyway. They were working on a duet, something beautiful and intimate that told the story of two people finding each other. The chemistry between them was undeniable, visible even in still photographs. They moved together like they'd been dancing their whole lives, like they understood each other on some cellular level. In one photo they were taking a break, sharing water, and laughing about something. Kaya's face was radiant, unguarded, happy in a way I hadn't seen since before she learned the truth about me. In another, they were embracing after what was clearly an intense rehearsal, both of them sweaty and exhausted and exhilarated. It was the kind of embrace that could have been professional or personal or both. In the final photo, they were kissing. I stared at that image for a long time, memorizing every detail, the way his hands cradled her face, the way she leaned into him, the way they both looked completely present, completely committed to the moment. It was everything I'd wanted to give her and never could. That night I called off the PI. Whatever else happened between Kaya and Tobias, I didn't want to know about it. I'd violated her privacy enough. "How are the wedding preparations coming?" my father asked over dinner the following evening. We were at his club surrounded by old men discussing business and politics and the proper management of their various estates. "Fine. Isabella has everything under control." "Good. The merger documents are almost finalized. The wedding will make it official, but the business side should be completed well before then." Merger documents. That's what my marriage had become, a corporate transaction with ceremonial elements. "Are you happy, Alexander?" The question caught me off guard. My father rarely inquired about my emotional state. "What do you mean? You seem subdued lately, distant. I hope you're not having second thoughts about Isabella. She's perfect for you, for our family." Perfect. There was that word again. "No second thoughts." I lied. "Good, because there's something I need to tell you." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know about the dancer." My blood froze. "What?" "Kaya Williams. I know you were involved with her. we're being the operative phrase, I assume, since she's moved on to someone more appropriate to her circumstances. He knew. Of course he knew. Harrison Sterling didn't maintain his empire by being ignorant of threats to his plans. How long have you known? From the beginning. Did you really think you could conduct an affair under my nose without me finding out? He sipped his wine calmly. I had her investigated her apartment, monitored her phone records, reviewed. I know everything, Alexander. The violation of it, the casual invasion of Kaya's privacy, made me sick. You had no right. I had every right. You're my son, my heir. Your choices affect the entire family. He set down his glass. But it's over now, isn't it? She's with the other dancer, the one who's actually from her world. It all worked out for the best. You knew about Tobias too. Of course, rather handsome fellow, talented, much more suitable for her than you would have been. He leaned back in his chair. Tell me, are you relieved now that the temptation has been removed? I wanted to hit him, wanted to stand up and walk out and never speak to him again. Wanted to drive to Oakland and fight for the woman I'd lost through my own cowardice. Instead, I sat there like the weak man I'd always been. I need to ask you something, I said quietly. Of course. If I'd chosen her, if I'd broken off the engagement and walked away from everything, would you really have destroyed me? He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Yes, he said finally, without hesitation. Because that's what love does, Alexander. It makes you weak. It makes you vulnerable. It makes you choose feelings over logic, passion over security. And weak men don't build empires. What if being strong isn't worth it? What if the empire isn't worth having if you have to give up love to keep it? Then you're not the man I raised you to be. He signaled for the check. But fortunately, it's a moot point now. The dancer has moved on. You're marrying Isabella in 4 months, and the Sterling legacy will continue as it should. That night I stood on my penthouse balcony looking out at the city lights and thinking about choices. About the path I'd taken and the one I'd abandoned. About the woman who was probably lying in another man's arms while I prepared to marry someone I didn't love. Somewhere out there, Kaya was building a new life, learning to love again. Dancing with someone who could give her honesty, presence, authentic partnership. And I was here trapped in a golden cage of my own making, counting down the days until I sealed my fate forever. 4 months until the wedding. 4 months to find the courage I'd never had. Or 4 months to resign myself to a lifetime of regret. Looking back now, I know which option I was already choosing, but I told myself I still had time to change my mind. I told myself a lot of lies in those days. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered with the rest of my mail to the Sterling Technologies offices. Cream-colored paper, elegant calligraphy. The kind of formal announcement that usually went straight to my assistant for filing. But this one had my name handwritten on the envelope. Kaya Williams and the Oakland Contemporary Dance Collective invite you to attend the premiere of Intersections, a Study in Modern Love, an original work choreographed by Kaya Williams and Tobias Reed. The performance was scheduled for Friday night at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, 3 days away. I stared at the invitation for a long time, trying to understand why she'd sent it. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. The last time I'd seen her was that glimpse through her apartment window, embracing another man. What did she want from me now, Mr. Sterling? My assistant's voice broke through my thoughts. You have the Morton Industries meeting in 5 minutes. I shoved the invitation into my desk drawer and tried to focus on business. But all through the meeting, all through the afternoon's conference calls and strategic planning sessions, I kept thinking about that cream-colored paper and what it might mean. That evening, I met Isabella for dinner at Gary Danko, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. We were there to finalize the guest list for our rehearsal dinner, another milestone in the endless march toward our June wedding. I was thinking we should seat your Uncle Richard next to the Hawthorns, Isabella was saying, consulting her color-coded seating chart. They have business interests in common, and Alexander, are you listening to me? Sorry, yes, Uncle Richard and the Hawthorns. She set down her pen and really looked at me. You've been distracted all evening, more than usual, I mean. What's wrong? How could I explain that I'd received an invitation to watch the woman I loved perform a dance about modern love with the man she'd replaced me with? How could I tell my fiancé that every detail of our wedding planning felt like another nail in the coffin of my soul? Just work stress, I said. The European expansion is more complicated than we anticipated. We'll try to focus on us for the next few hours. We only have 3 months left to finalize everything. 3 months, 12 weeks, 84 days until I stood at an altar and promised to love, honor, and cherish a woman I barely knew, while the woman who owned my heart danced with someone else. The next day I told myself I wouldn't go to the performance. It would be masochistic, pointless, a reopening of wounds that were finally starting to heal. I had dinner plans with Isabella's parents anyway, another round of wedding discussions over expensive wine and polite conversation. But Thursday night I found myself calling Isabella. "I'm so sorry, but I have to cancel tomorrow evening. Client emergency, rain check on dinner with your parents." Again. There was an edge to her voice I'd been hearing more often lately. "Alexander, this is the 3rd time this month you've cancelled plans for work. I know and I'm sorry, but you know how demanding the business can be. I'm starting to think the business is more important to you than I am." The irony of that statement, that she was jealous of work when my real distraction was another woman, almost made me laugh. "Of course not. You're the most important thing in my life." Another lie. They came so easily now. Friday evening found me sitting in the back row of the Yerba Buena Center's theater, wearing jeans and a baseball cap like some kind of stalker. I'd arrived just as the lights were dimming, slipping in anonymously among the crowd of dance enthusiasts and arts supporters. The program notes described Intersections as an exploration of how two people from different worlds find each other across the barriers of class, race, and expectation. The irony wasn't lost on me. When the curtain rose, my breath caught in my throat. Kaya stood alone in a pool of golden light, wearing a simple white dress that seemed to glow against her dark skin. The opening music was haunting melancholy, speaking of longing and loss. She began to move, and immediately I was transported back to that first night at the charity gala, watching her transform pain into beauty. But this was different, more mature, more complex, carrying the weight of lived experience. The dance told a story, her story, I realized, with growing recognition. A woman isolated by circumstances, moving through a world that didn't see her clearly, searching for connection, for understanding, for someone who could love her authentically. Then Tobias entered the stage. I'd seen photos, but nothing had prepared me for the reality of watching him move. He was magnificent, powerful, and graceful, with an emotional transparency that made every gesture feel genuine. When he approached Kaya's character, when they began to dance together, the chemistry was undeniable. They moved like two people who understood each other completely. Where Kaya was fluid grace, Tobias was solid strength. Where she was delicate precision, he was passionate power. Together they created something that was more than the sum of their individual talents. They created truth. The piece unfolded in movements, meeting attraction, resistance, fear, breakthrough love. I watched their characters navigate obstacles, overcome misunderstandings, fight for their connection. I watched them choose each other again and again through every challenge the choreography threw at them. And in the final movement, I watched them find their way to a love that was honest, equal, and unashamed. The ending was transcendent. Kaya and Tobias moving in perfect synchronization, their bodies telling a story of two people who'd found their home in each other. The lighting bathed them in warm gold as they embraced, and the music swelled to a triumphant crescendo that seemed to fill every corner of my chest. The audience erupted in applause. People leaped to their feet, shouting, "Bravo!" and "Encore!" I sat frozen in my seat, tears streaming down my face, watching Kaya and Tobias take their bows. She was radiant, exhausted and exhilarated, and completely alive. When Tobias kissed her cheek during their final bow, she laughed with pure joy. I'd never seen her look happier. As the curtain fell and the audience began to file out, I remained in my seat, unable to move. What I just witnessed wasn't just a dance performance. It was a glimpse into the life Kaya had built without me. A life filled with authentic partnership, creative collaboration, and the kind of love that didn't require secrets or shame. It was everything I'd wanted to give her and never could. Alexander, I looked up to find Kaya standing in the aisle beside my row. She changed out of her costume into jeans and a simple black top, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked beautiful and nervous and strangely vulnerable. "Hi," I managed. "You came? You invited me." She nodded, though she didn't look entirely surprised to see me. What did you think?" "It was incredible. You were incredible. Both of you." A small smile crossed her face. "Thank you. That means a lot." We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, surrounded by the emptying theater. "Kaya, don't," she said gently. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Please. I just want you to know that I'm happy for you, that you found someone who can give you what you deserve." Her expression softened. "He's a good man, Alexander, honest, present, unafraid to love me openly." Each word was a knife to my chest, but I nodded. "I can see that. The way you two move together, it's beautiful." "It is," she agreed. "It's real." Real. The word hung between us, full of everything we'd never had. "I should go," I said, starting to stand. "Wait." She touched my arm gently. "I need to tell you something. The reason I invited you tonight." I sat back down, my heart pounding. "I loved you," she said simply. "I loved you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. And for a long time I was angry about how things ended between us. Angry and hurt and bitter. Kaya. But watching you tonight, seeing the pain in your face during the performance, I realized something. You're not happy either, are you? You're marrying Isabella, but you're not happy." I couldn't answer, couldn't lie to her again. "I wanted you to see what love looks like when it doesn't have to hide," she continued. "When two people choose each other openly without shame or conditions or elaborate justifications. I wanted you to see what we could have had if you'd been brave enough to choose it." The words hit like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "I know," I whispered. "Do you?" "Because I don't think you do. I think you've convinced yourself that your engagement is inevitable, that you had no choice, that this is just how your life has to be." "It is how my life has to be." "No, it isn't." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the passion I remembered. "You still have a choice, Alexander. Right now, today, you could choose differently. You could choose love over obligation, authenticity over expectation. It's too late. The wedding is in 3 months. Everything's planned, paid for. So what? Cancel it. Walk away. Find the courage you should have had 2 years ago." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" We stared at each other in the empty theater, surrounded by the ghosts of the performance I'd just witnessed. The performance that had shown me exactly what I'd lost and would never have. "I should go," I said again. This time she didn't stop me. I made it halfway up the aisle before I turned back. Kaya. She was still sitting in her seat, watching me with those beautiful, knowing eyes. "Are you happy, really happy?" Her smile was soft, genuine, and completely content. "Yes," she said, "I really am." I nodded and walked away, leaving her there in the theater where she'd just shown me the life I was too much of a coward to choose. The drive home was a blur. By the time I reached my penthouse, I was shaking with rage and grief and self-loathing. I poured myself a scotch and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the choice Kaya had laid before me. Cancel the wedding, walk away from everything, choose love over obligation. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself imagine it. Calling Isabella tomorrow, telling her the truth. Facing my father's rage, the social scandal, the financial ruin. Starting over with nothing but my own hands and whatever remained of my soul. It was terrifying. It was also the only chance I had at real happiness. But as I stood there in my expensive apartment, surrounded by all the trappings of my privileged life, I knew I would never do it. I was exactly who Kaya thought I was, a coward who chose comfort over courage, security over love. And in 3 months, I would marry Isabella Hartwell and seal my fate forever. Some men were brave enough to fight for love. I wasn't one of them. 2 weeks after the performance, I was a walking corpse. I went through the motions of my life board meetings, wedding planning sessions, dinners with Isabella, but I felt hollow, like everything real inside me had been carved out and discarded. The image of Kaya and Tobias dancing together haunted me. The way they moved as one person, the way they looked at each other with complete trust and openness, the way love seemed to radiate from their very pores. I'd seen what authentic partnership looked like, and it made my upcoming marriage feel like an elaborate funeral for my soul. The final dress fitting is next Tuesday. Isabella was telling me over lunch at the Ritz-Carlton. We were sitting in their elegant dining room surrounded by fresh flowers and crystal stemware, planning the last details of our wedding. And the photographer wants to schedule a pre-wedding shoot this weekend, something romantic for the society pages. Romantic. I almost laughed at the word. Alexander, you're doing it again. Doing what? Disappearing. You're sitting right here, but you're not actually present. Her voice carried an edge of frustration that had been growing stronger over the past few weeks. I'm starting to think you don't want to marry me at all. The directness of her statement caught me off guard. Isabella rarely spoke so bluntly. Of course I want to marry you, I said automatically. Do you? She set down her fork and really looked at me. Because for the past month you've seemed like a man going to his own execution rather than his wedding. I'm just stressed about work. Stop. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Stop lying to me, Alexander. I may be polite and well-bred, but I'm not stupid. There's someone else, isn't there? My blood turned to ice. What makes you say that? The way you've been acting, distracted, guilty, like you're living two different lives. My mother warned me this might happen, that men sometimes have distractions before marriage. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew something was wrong. Isabella. I don't want to know who she is, she said quietly. I don't want to know when it started or how long it lasted or whether you love her. I just want to know if it's over. The question hung between us like a sword. She was offering me an out, a way to confess without consequences, a chance to clear the air and move forward. I should have taken it, should have told her yes, it was over, should have recommitted to our engagement and our future together. Instead, I heard myself saying, no, it's not over. Her face went very still. I see. Isabella, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. But you did mean to marry me while in love with someone else. Put like that, it sounded even more monstrous than I'd realized. It's complicated. No, it isn't. It's actually quite simple. You're in love with another woman and you were planning to marry me anyway. For my father's business connections, for the social approval, for whatever practical benefits our union would provide. She was right, of course. That's exactly what I'd been planning to do. I thought I could make it work, I said weakly, by lying to me for the rest of our lives, by pretending to love me while thinking about her. I do care about you, Isabella. I always have. But you don't love me. It wasn't a question. No, I admitted. I don't love you. She nodded slowly as if confirming something she'd already known. And you love her? Yes. Then why are you here? Why are you marrying me instead of her? The question I'd been avoiding for 2 years finally demanded an answer. Because I'm a coward, I said quietly. Because she deserves better than someone who would keep her as a secret. Because I'm too weak to disappoint my father and give up everything I've been raised to want. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. You know what the saddest part is? She said finally. I actually feel sorry for you. What? You're throwing away real love for fake security. You're choosing a life that will make you miserable because you're too afraid to reach for happiness. She reached into her purse and pulled out something small and glittering, her engagement ring. I may not be the love of your life, Alexander, but I'm worth more than being someone's consolation prize. She placed the ring on the table between us with a soft click. Isabella, wait. No, I'm done waiting. I've been waiting for you to actually be present in this relationship for months, and now I know why you never could be. She stood up, gathering her purse with dignity that made me feel even smaller. I'm calling off the engagement. You can't. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Everything's arranged, paid for. Money can be lost. Deposits can be forfeited. But dignity, once you give it away, is much harder to get back. She looked down at me with something that might have been pity. Go to her, Alexander. Stop being a coward and go to the woman you love. It's too late. She's with someone else now. Then fight for her, or don't. But stop pretending you can be happy with a life built on lies. She walked away, then her heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving me alone with her engagement ring and the wreckage of my carefully constructed plans. I sat there for a long time, staring at that 3-carat diamond and thinking about what I'd just done. In the space of 10 minutes, I'd destroyed my engagement, humiliated a good woman, and probably triggered a social scandal that would reverberate through San Francisco society for months. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Isabella had called her parents, who'd called my father, who was now demanding my immediate presence at his office. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care about Harrison Sterling's demands. I drove to Oakland instead. Kaya's studio was busy with an evening class when I arrived. Through the large windows, I could see her teaching a group of teenagers, her movements fluid and encouraging as she demonstrated a complex sequence. She looked beautiful and alive, and completely in her element. I waited in my car until class ended, watching her students file out with tired smiles and the satisfied exhaustion that comes from good work. When the last teenager left, I got out of the car and walked to the studio door. She saw me coming and her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "Alexander, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The studio smelled like sweat and rosine and dreams so different from the sterile luxury of my usual world. "Kaya, if you're here to tell me you're getting married in 6 weeks, I already know. The society pages have been counting down for months." "I'm not getting married." She froze. "What?" "I called off the engagement. Today. Isabella broke up with me actually, but I would have done it eventually. I hope." "You hope?" "I'm a coward, Kaya. I always have been. But watching you perform 2 weeks ago, seeing what real love looks like. I couldn't go through with the wedding. I couldn't spend my life lying to Isabella and to myself." She was staring at me like I was a stranger. "So you're free now. Just like that. Just like that. And you came here because I love you. Because I've always loved you. Because I want to try again if you'll let me." The silence stretched between us, filled with 2 years of hurt and betrayal and broken promises. "Alexander," she said finally, her voice very gentle, "I'm with Tobias now. I know, I saw you together at the performance, and I know you don't understand. I'm with him. We're living together. We're building a life together. A real life based on honesty and mutual respect and actual partnership." Each word was a nail in the coffin of my hopes. "But do you love him?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "I do. Maybe not the same desperate, consuming way I loved you, but I love him. He's good to me, good for me. He sees me clearly and chooses me every day without reservation or conditions. I can do that now. I can choose you every day. Can you? Because 2 weeks ago, you were still planning to marry someone else. If I hadn't sent you that invitation, if you hadn't seen what you were missing, would you be here now?" She was right, and we both knew it. "Probably not," I admitted. "That's what I thought." She moved to the windows, looking out at the street where we'd shared so many stolen moments. "I waited for you, Alexander. For months after our last conversation, I waited for you to find the courage to choose me. But you never did. I'm choosing you now. 2 years too late." She turned back to face me and her eyes were sad but resolved. "I'm not the same person I was when you knew me. That woman who would have accepted being your secret, who would have waited indefinitely for you to make up your mind, she doesn't exist anymore. Then who are you now? I'm someone who knows her worth, someone who refuses to be anyone's second choice or backup plan, someone who's learned that love without courage isn't really love at all." The words cut deep because they were true. "So there's no chance. No possibility that we could know." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "I'm happy, Alexander. Really genuinely happy. And you know what, I think I'm happier without you than I ever was with you." The brutal honesty of it took my breath away. Because with you, I was always waiting. Waiting for you to tell the truth. Waiting for you to choose me. Waiting for our relationship to become real. With Tobias, I don't have to wait for anything. We're partners from day one. I nodded, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. This was it. The final closing of a door I'd spent 2 years trying to keep open. "I should go," I said. Yes, you should. I walked toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. Kaya. Yes. For what it's worth, I really did love you. More than I've ever loved anyone or anything. Her smile was sad and genuine. I know you did. In your own way, with the emotional tools you had, you loved me as much as you were capable of. But it wasn't enough. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I left her there in her studio surrounded by mirrors that reflected nothing but truth and walked out into the Oakland evening, knowing I'd lost her forever. Not because she'd been stolen from me, but because I never had the courage to truly claim her in the first place. Some mistakes can be forgiven, some can even be fixed. But some mistakes cost you everything, and all you can do is live with the consequences. As I drove back to my empty penthouse, past the life I'd chosen over love, I finally understood which kind of mistake I'd made, and I knew I'd be paying for it for the rest of my life. 6 months later, I sat in my penthouse office staring out at San Francisco Bay, while my assistant briefed me on quarterly projections. Sterling Technologies was having its best year ever. The European expansion had exceeded all expectations. My personal net worth had climbed to 400 million. By every metric that mattered to my father, I was a tremendous success. Mr. Sterling, my assistant's voice pulled me back to the present. Should I schedule the follow-up meeting with the Munich team? What? Oh yes, whatever you think is best. She made a note and continued with her report, but I'd already drifted away again. These days I found it hard to focus on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. Success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. The scandal of my broken engagement had dominated society pages for months. Isabella had handled it with characteristic grace, telling everyone that we'd grown apart and wanted different things. She was seeing someone new, now a federal judge who looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined. I was genuinely happy for her. My father had been less understanding. "You've humiliated this family," he'd raged the day after I called off the wedding. "Thrown away a perfect alliance for what, some romantic fantasy? For my sanity," I'd replied, which only made him angrier. We barely spoke now. I still ran Sterling Technologies, still attended board meetings and made strategic decisions. But the easy relationship we'd once shared was over. He saw me as a disappointment, a weak link in the Sterling chain. Maybe he was right. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd finally found the courage to defy him, but only after I'd lost the woman who'd inspired that courage in the first place. "That's everything for today," my assistant said, closing her tablet. "Unless you need anything else." "No thank you, have a good evening." After she left, I poured myself a scotch and returned to the window. Somewhere out there, Kaya was living her life. Teaching her classes, choreographing new pieces, building something real with Tobias. I'd kept tabs on her from a distance. Not invasively, I'd learned that lesson, but through public channels. Her studio had expanded. She'd received a grant to start that scholarship program she'd always dreamed of. Last month, her company had performed at the Kennedy Center in Washington. She was thriving. In my weaker moments, I told myself that my sacrifice had been worth it. That by stepping away, I'd allowed her to find the happiness she deserved with someone who could love her openly, completely, without reservation. It was a pretty lie, but a lie nonetheless. The truth was simpler and uglier. I'd been a coward when it mattered most, and now I was living with the consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from a woman I'd been seeing casually. Catherine, a curator at SF MoMA. Beautiful, intelligent, appropriately connected. She wanted to know if I was free for dinner. I started to reply, then stopped. What was the point? Catherine was lovely, but she wasn't Kaya. No one was Kaya. No one would ever make me feel the way Kaya had made me feel. Alive, authentic, capable of being more than the sum of my bank accounts. I deleted the text without responding. Instead, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I opened my laptop and searched for recent news about Kaya's company. The first result made my heart stop. Local dance company announces engagement, Kaya Williams and Tobias Reed to wed. There was a photo, Kaya radiant in a simple white dress, Tobias beside her in a well-fitted suit, both of them glowing with happiness. They were at some kind of outdoor celebration surrounded by friends and fellow dancers, everyone laughing and toasting and celebrating love. The article described their relationship as a partnership built on mutual artistic vision and deep personal connection. It mentioned their upcoming wedding in the fall, a small ceremony, followed by a reception at Kaya's expanded studio. I stared at that photo for a long time, memorizing every detail. The way Tobias looked at her, protective and adoring and completely present. The way she leaned into him, trusting and content and genuinely happy. It was everything I'd wanted to give her and never could. My phone rang, another board member with another crisis that required my immediate attention. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I poured another scotch and thought about choices. 2 years ago, I could have chosen differently. I could have walked away from my father's expectations, from the sterling empire, from the suffocating weight of generational wealth. I could have chosen love over security, authenticity over approval. 1 year ago, when Isabella confronted me about my feelings, I could have been honest sooner, could have ended our engagement before it became a public spectacle, could have fought for Kaya while there was still time. 6 months ago, when I finally found the courage to break free, I could have done it for the right reasons. Not because watching Kaya with someone else made me jealous, but because living a lie was slowly killing me. But I'd made the wrong choice at every turn, and now I was living with the consequences. The worst part wasn't even the loneliness, though that was crushing. The worst part was knowing that I'd become exactly what Kaya had accused me of, being a hollow man, playing at being real, choosing comfort over courage, security over authenticity. I was successful, wealthy, powerful, everything my father had raised me to be. I was also completely, utterly empty. As the sun set over the bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded me of the first night I'd kissed Kaya, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would start living differently. Not for her, it was too late for her, but for myself. I would find a way to be authentic, to make choices based on what felt right, rather than what looked good on paper. I would learn to be the man Kaya had seen in me, even if she'd never see it herself. But tonight I would mourn. For the love I'd lost through my own cowardice, for the life I might have had if I'd been braver, for the man I could have been if I'd learned to value truth over comfort. Outside my window, the city sparkled with possibility. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love, making brave choices, building authentic lives. Somewhere out there, Kaya was planning her wedding to a man who'd never made her feel like a secret. And here I was in my golden tower, finally understanding the difference between having everything and having what matters. It was a lesson that had cost me the only thing I'd ever really wanted. But maybe eventually it would teach me how to live. I raised my glass to the window, to the city, to the woman I'd loved and lost and would never forget. To authentic love, I whispered, and to the courage I finally found too late. Then I finished my drink and began the long, lonely work of learning to live with my choices. Some stories end with the hero getting the girl. Some end with the realization that you were never the hero at all. This was one of the latter, and somehow that was exactly the ending I deserved. 5 years of deception, 2 years of cowardice, 1 moment of truth that came too late. Alexander Sterling had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. In the end, the millionaire who hid his love for 5 years learned that some secrets cost more than their worth and some mistakes can never be undone.